there is work to be done here. We have a council which is accountable for the town, a council which you suggested I should remove myself from this because of a conflict of interest, suggesting I have been mayor of 10 years when you're suggesting contamination has occurred. Not to my knowledge, for one, because some council will not be getting that granular until we're told reports. But council has the authority to ensure this project, any remediation is done to ensure the proper sampling is completed. The report comes to council, we make decisions about how we proceed going forward. So it's disappointing to understand you don't believe council has the ability to oversee staff and its assets.
Could I push back on that? It's not that I don't think you have the ability. You clearly have the ability. You're choosing not to disclose the accurate information.
Oh.
And in lieu of that, excuse me,
if I may, the sampling, we've hired St. Lawrence to do the sampling.
I have a copy of the report. It clearly says these aren't small levels of heavy metals. I don't know what to tell you that's not accurate.
Some of the information that has been circulated isn't correct. And the town is working with St. Lawrence. St. Lawrence, where we get the name of it here? Anyway, it's testing and inspection. Sorry, yes. And they have indicated that the testing is not. The testing is scheduled. The testing thresholds are Schedule 7, not Schedule 1, has been indicated. And as a result, the actual levels of contamination are much more acceptable and is considered not potable water, not potable groundwater from the source of where it's at. So that's what our consultant has indicated so far. So I think we have to be cautious about suggesting to the community that there is a risk to our drinking water.
Soil samples were tested against, and this is important, Ontario Regulation 153/04. Particularly Table 7 soil standards for commercial property, which the site is, with coarse, shallow soil, and non-potable groundwater. 3 of the 5 locations had exceedances when we tested of cadmium, lead, and zinc. And when we test, we send to an accredited laboratory that St. Lawrence Testing works with to have these soil samples tested. So fast forward to December 12th, 2024. At that time, 10 additional test pits were identified to, again, shallow test pits to be dug and soil samples collected. Again, the samples were collected for lab analysis, tested against PHCs, PAHs, which are polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, that's a handle, metals, and inorganics. Soil samples were tested against the same Ontario regulation that I noted before. However, at this point, we were testing against potable groundwater due to the fact that we're in an intake protection zone. 5 of the 10 soil samples met Table 2 standards for PHCs, metals, inorganics, along with those PAHs, that polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbon. 5 of the soil samples contain concentrations of PHCs and/or metals and/or PAHs that exceeded the Table 2 standards. Again, this will all be kind of pulled together as we get towards the tail end of my verbal report here this evening. So not to alarm you with the fact that we had some exceedances.
Thanks, Director Rickman, for bringing this back and giving some insight into what's been happening over the last, I guess, several months since this issue first arose over a year ago, I guess. So you've been working with the MECP, I guess you and staff have been, along with St. Lawrence Testing, to ensure, I guess, we're meeting all the regulatory requirements, doing all the testing that's required to ensure that there is the testing needed to ensure that there's no exceedances there that are going to create a risk or a danger. Considering it's in our source water protection zone, our water intake zone, is there any risk to our source water coming into our drinking water system as a result of of the compost, originating from the compost site?
Thank you for the question and through the chair. So at this point, and through the testing that we've done, It's town staff as well as St. Lawrence Testing are of the opinion that there is no evidence to suggest that the town's drinking water is compromised from operations at the compost site. Like I'd mentioned before, we collected surface water samples back in March just to ensure that there wasn't any, from the spring runoff, from the freshet, if you will, snow melt, rain, all of that water, if you will, running over land and making its way into the adjacent creek system, crossing 43 and eventually making its way to the Rideau River, where obviously our intake is for our water plant on Abbott Street. So those water samples came back well within limits based on the criteria that it's being tested against. So that's why I say we can unequivocally say that we have no suspicions of any compromised operations at the site or any operations at the site that would compromise historically or currently today or presumably in the future that would compromise our water source.
Thank you. And in addition to that, we do testing at the water treatment plant for certain elements, I assume, and also PHCs. That's the right expression. The
Hydrocarbons.
Hydrocarbons, yes. That's something we test for?
I'd have to come back to council on that one. There are certain things that, like metals, et cetera, perhaps, and PHCs are essentially, oil and fuel and diesel and all that kind of stuff. We have no indication that any of this is within our, coming from upstream, albeit it's possible, but you got to remember that those products those PHCs would typically, in my opinion, I'm not an expert on this, but you think about it, if you're out in your boat and you have a spill at the fuel docks, all of that floats on surface. Our intake within the Rideau River is below grade on very, very close to the river bottom. Right, so I think there'd be very little to no opportunity for PHCs to get in.